Labor Talks was John DeRozier, recorded at Chippewa Valley Community Television in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Good day and welcome to Labor Talks. My name is still John DeRozier, and our special guest today is Joe Luginbill, recently elected to the Eau Claire Area School Board. Joe, welcome to Labor Talks.
Thanks for having me on, John.
Good to have you here. Now, how long have you been serving on the school board?
Sure. Well, I was just elected in the most recent spring election, and I was sworn in at the end of April. So I'm still a little wet behind the ears, but diving right into everything.
Okay. And why did you decide to run for the Eau Claire Area School Board?
Sure. Well, I decided to run for a number of reasons. For a long time, I felt a real calling to service. I've been very fortunate to have some success in my life and career, and it's really due to my teachers, the people that are so kind-hearted in this community that cared for me and mentored me growing up. My father is a teacher in the district, and he has been for about 2 decades now. And so from an early age, I was in the Eau Claire Public Schools. You might have found me running around in a diaper in the 1990s throughout the halls of North High. Because, he'd take me there when he had to go to work during the summers or things like that. So this district has been such a huge part of my life for my entire life, and it means such a great deal to me. So that's really why I decided to run. I had enough people ask, and I thought it would be a good time given my maybe younger perspective and also my passions and my decent name recognition in the community. So,
and what do you appreciate most about being on the school board?
Well, we have fantastic teachers. We have some really cool students and rock star parents. It only takes going to a couple PTO or PTA meetings to really see that. And we have really dedicated support staff in our schools. Just state-of-the-art facilities. Some have more needs than others, but really nicely maintained facilities. And there's so much that goes on in our district behind the scenes, and you really come to appreciate a lot of that as a school board member. I was just at DeLong last week and talking with some of the staff, and one of the Buildings and Grounds crew members was talking to me about how just last week they were going through every single locker at DeLong, cleaning through every single one individually, and then manually changing the combination of each one. So you just think of things like that. I mean, that's not out on the news. They don't put it on the website. But just some behind-the-scenes things that really speak to all the hard work that goes into making a district of our size run. But my favorite part of being a school board member is having the opportunity to interact with students, with parents, with teachers and staff. We learn about what their values are, learn about what they like and what they don't like, and most importantly, hear their ideas, because most of the time they're pretty good ideas. Whether they're a 5th grader or someone that's a retiree from the district, you can always take something from them. And that's always a fun thing. But, I'm proud of the fact that I'm the youngest school board member in the history of the district, but just being a school board member is something that is a great honor. Our district has been around since 1890, and you can bet your bottom dollar we've been to hell and back countless times as a district. We've been through a lot. There's a lot of history, and I'm excited to be a part of that history now, moving forward to help improve things. And I'm extremely grateful that voters put me in that role.
Now, with every upside, there is a downside, okay? What do you appreciate least about being on the school board?
Sure. Well, I have a couple concerns.
And don't tell me it was the teachers who gave you all those bad grades and flunked you out of school. No.
I never got bad grades. What are you talking about? No, I had a couple. What I do not like, I don't like the one-size-fits-all approach that we get oftentimes coming down the pipe from the state and federal government. I don't like that as a school board member. I also wish we had a better funding and budgetary situation. That really puts our district in a pinch. Granted, $30 million plus in cuts later, as a district, we're still here and we're still doing excellent work, but it makes things pretty difficult. It really hurts morale. It can damage a lot of things. I've also found that one of my biggest concerns is communication. My hope is to make it clear, now that I'm elected, make it clear to students and staff, parents, citizens, taxpayers, that I was elected to serve all of them, not just some of them. So as a board, we aren't able to effectively govern if we have communication barriers, if we don't know what the values of our electorate are, if we don't know what people want and what they think. So, that's not a unique problem to our district. As a county board member, I'm sure you face that in your county, but I think every organization faces these issues, but we have to tackle it head on. And that's one of the reasons why I'm actually planning some listening sessions in the next coming months. I think it'll be a very crucial opportunity for me as an elected official to hear and learn from the public and from students. It won't be canned, it won't be scripted. It'll be something that is a very real and honest place for communication. And unlike more recent, kind of more sanctioned events, this will be one with very open opportunities to speak your piece. And events like that can sometimes be messy, but I think democracy is supposed to be a little messy. So,
Now, one thing I should point out, I was just kidding about teachers in poor grades. That is my sense of humor. If I ruffled anybody's feathers, I apologize. Well, thank you very much. What are the most pressing problems facing the Eau Claire School Board? I assume those problems are statewide as well?
I would think so. Right now, I would say for our district, budget, compensation across the board is something we need to look at, continue to talk about, and really be bold about. Just cultural things about the district, and that includes communication concerns and how we can move forward with those. Formulating our strategic plan is obviously something that we're spending a lot of time on right now. We just had a forum at North Star Middle School with over 80 community members that attended, and we have a strategic planning team which is comprised of a number of stakeholders. So we're working on that, really looking to the next 10 years and not just the next 10 months. With everything going on, I think it's pretty easy to get tunnel vision as a school board member and as leaders. But doing that really shortchanges the potential of our district and ultimately shortchanges kids.
Now, you mentioned budget as one of the most. Could you go into some detail about that, please? Are we looking at shrinking budgets, and what's the cause of that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, one thing we've seen for over a decade now, 2 decades, is the revenue limit from the state. That has really squeezed us a bit. Decreases in state aid. Just looking at this current budget that we just had passed, I have a number of concerns with that, not only as a resident and a nonprofit manager and a property taxpayer, but especially as a school board member. There are a number of non-fiscal items in the budget, and I think that's pretty bad practice. And looking through all of them, some I don't have a problem with necessarily, but I think that each of those items deserves scrutiny on its own. It deserves public debate and public discussion, really for accountability to citizens. There are a lot of unfunded mandates in this budget, which is obviously business as usual. We've all faced that as local governments and municipalities for years now. From requirements of notifications to parents and guardians, special needs vouchers, the new civic test graduation requirement, list of educational opportunities, school accountability guidelines, academic standard notifications, all sorts of new things, and none of those have funding attached to them, but they were put in the budget as new requirements for school districts. So those are, obviously, difficult to navigate. Because the revenue limit is frozen. And this is a thing that I think we really need to do better on in educating citizens. Because the revenue limit is frozen, any increase in general aids goes to property tax reduction. It doesn't go to the Eau Claire Area School District. We don't see a penny of it. And you hear the talking point that they increase that aid. But if the revenue limit is not raised, we don't see that. There's also no per pupil increase in current revenue limits. That's a really difficult thing. Years ago, there was relatively predictable, maybe studied, measured growth in revenue limits that we used to be able to, from year to year, plan it to an extent, to a pretty good extent. Now there really isn't. So that makes planning very difficult for local governments like ours. And you look at the special education categorical aid, which is again staying flat. That's a really difficult thing because the level of reimbursement with special ed has now fallen. It's below 30%. It's now below 27%. Soon it'll be 25% of aidable costs that they're reimbursing. And so that's just pretty clear that special education is one of those things that is grossly underfunded and has so many unfunded state and federal mandates along with it. So we really need more resources for things like special education to meet local district costs and the needs of kids. I can't say enough positive things about the state's the special education programs in our district. But the state really needs to step up to the plate on these things and on that front. There are a lot of other areas I'm sure I could go into with the budget.
You'll have your opportunity.
There are some I enjoy that I looked at in the budget and I actually agree with. There are some areas I like. One of them, I support some of the teacher licensure things they had. That they really whittled it down and left out some loopholes. I support part of that because at the end of the day, the district can still determine which candidates they will consider and what requirements they would like to look for in a prospective candidate. So, I support reasonable efforts, if they're reasonable, to provide pathways to licensure for teaching. And I also agreed with a couple other changes. One was including teacher and administrator contract renewal and changing some details with that so that it was better in line with the actual school year when students were out, when students were graduating. Better help the schools in terms of that. And I like the Teach 2.0 program that they put in the budget. But again, these are things that should be separate. I certainly agree with Teach 2.0 because that's really dealing with increasing telecommunications access for schools through grants. And, for rural school districts, that could be a great thing. But again, does that belong in a budget? Or maybe that should be,
Would you explain what 2.0 is, please?
Yeah, well, Teach 2.0 program, what it really deals with, it's an expanded grant program that they put in the budget. And what it really looks at is expanding. It could be for any school district if they qualify. It's really about, how do I put this best? It's really about improving access for schools in terms of educational technology and the telecommunications piece, the access to video and links and things like that. We have in our district a really robust operation for that, but some districts I think are really lacking. And that's, again, kind of the equity thing you see across the state. So what that program really, from what I've read about it, it's an expanded grant program that districts can now look into and qualify for that would really be targeted towards those areas. And so looking at it, I thought, I think this is a positive thing. But again, does it, should it maybe be a separate piece of legislation that you look at? One thing that I had some concerns about was when they're looking at some of the assessment piece in the budget, and they actually defunded through the budget the Smarter Balances assessments, which school districts were using. And what's difficult about that, the most difficult thing about that, is that now we're looking at transitioning to a third different assessment in 3 years. So I'm all for innovation. I'm all for new ideas. I'm all for process improvement. But instability like that is not good, especially when you're kind of squeezed in terms of your staff load and people need to get trained in on something new and that they need to get behind. So, there are a number of areas with the budget. I was very impressed with the local response, and I thought it was very respectful. I had a lot of people contacting me, contacting the school district, with their concerns, and I tried to respond to every single call, email, text that I got about it, because people were very engaged. And we need to stay engaged, because really what the budget should be is a reflection of the values of the people of this state. I'm not sure if this last budget was. I really don't think it was. That's my personal opinion, not the opinion of the district. But
now, this is a repetitive type question, but
Mhm.
we're going to go into some more detail. But what challenges has the Eau Claire Area School Board faced in the past due to the state budget? Could you go into a bit more detail there?
that they faced in the past due to the state budget?
Yeah, up until this most recent budget.
Well, I mean, you look back to 1993 and revenue limits taking effect. And since then, we've seen referendums all across the state all the time.
Mhm.
Some pass, some fail. Unfortunately, a lot of the districts that need the most, voters can't afford a referendum. And that's a real challenge, because citizens want to step up for quality public schools, but sometimes the resources aren't there to do that. So you just look at, it's right on the school district website, they have a PDF of all of the cuts since just 1993. It's been over $30 million in cuts. And those are not just cuts of salaries at the top. Those are significant cuts to programming, to teaching staff, to field trips, to things that maybe I enjoyed when I was in elementary school, but now kids have never heard of. Going on the school trip to Sunnyview Schoolhouse and spending the day there and learning about local history. That's something that they don't do anymore.
Now, you talked about the past problems.
Mm-hmm.
Let's shoot forward to right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume that the problems that we're looking at right now, because of the current budget,
Mm-hmm.
are even worse than what you were looking at, say, 30 years ago.
I think so. You hear the word get thrown out a lot that the current situation at the state level is unsustainable, and I would agree with that. I really think that, unfortunately, many of the policies that are coming from the state level are very unstudied approaches. They're not looking at it from the perspective of, is this good for students? Is this good for the schools? I think that there might be different motivations there. And like I say, I think many of them are unstudied approaches. They haven't been done in other states. And, that's a real challenge. I support charter schools for experimental and innovative programs. I can talk to you for hours about how great the Montessori Charter School is here in the Chippewa Valley. But, like it is with the Montessori school, there needs to be accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Not only to those parents and students, but to the taxpayers who are footing the bill. You can't have fly-by-night operations that are basically operating like a business. They have their school, and then it closes. Well, what happens to those kids? They're basically left high and dry. They have to start from scratch somewhere else. That's not good for our education in Wisconsin. The other part, I generally oppose standards that dictate local curricula. I don't think that the implementation of the Common Core standards in reading, writing, and math was a negative thing by any means, but I do think we need to continue to have the flexibility as a school board to select, approve, and implement local district standards that will far exceed the Common Core standards. We can set the bar real high as a district. We have phenomenal staff and phenomenal kids, but we need to empower our staff and engage our staff in ways that I think we might have fallen a little short of doing in the past.
What damage do you expect to see coming from the just passed state budget? And I know that there's been some pretty severe cuts made.
Oh, there have been. Like I've been touching on. We're basically staying flat this next year. And just to cover what we need to do as a district, we're possibly looking at having to go into our working capital. And whenever that happens, that's something that puts off a lot of red flashing alarm signals for superintendents and for board members, because you want to be in a much better financial situation. So this really is all calling for us board members. It's a time for all of us to get together and look at what we do have here, because we still have a lot as a district. We have a lot to offer. We have a lot we can do. We have amazing potential. But looking at all of it and having everything on the table and really doing a value and student-based look at it, it's kind of what we need to do now. There are things that are happening at the state level that are making it more and more difficult for us as a district to do business. And I touched on the money issues. I've touched on the unfunded mandates. You look at things, though, like they deleted the property insurance fund, which I and many other municipal and school district elected officials thought was very damaging. As a district, we move forward with another company because we need to keep moving forward. We need to keep doing our work and expanding and improving. But there are many things that we do face from the state government that are a detriment to public education. I am very pleased to see that we have local reps who voted against the budget, and some of them did cite education issues. So to me, that was a good sign. But we need to continue that public dialogue. And more than ever, you know, you look at WASB, the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. They have lobbyists, right? So they're in Madison all the time. They're based in Madison, but they're at the Capitol and meeting with lawmakers and state leaders. They're getting to the point where a lot of elected officials won't listen to the WASB lobbyists. So they send in us, the school board members. Well, we're getting to the point where they won't listen to school board members a lot of the time. The one piece that they have to listen to, though, is those parents and voters. If we engage and inspire parents and voters to really look at the values that we hold dear in our district, and if they also agree with them, and if they agree with us that some of these things are challenging and that we need to be looking at ways to improve them and, you know, speak out against things that might not be a good idea, they might be unstudied approaches that would harm the education system, we need to mobilize those people. They're really our voices, you know.
Question. My next question is, how will this budget affect students and teachers? And by that I mean, are we seeing teachers leaving the profession or leaving the state of Wisconsin? And are the students, are they now, or will they be sitting in larger classes?
Oh, I mean, large class sizes are a big concern of mine, and we do get parents that will send us emails and phone calls about it. It's a huge concern. And unfortunately, we're in situations where we have rather large class sizes in some schools. Some schools are better than others in the area because some, you know, have been clumped with referendums in the past. But some, like Roosevelt Elementary School, they were not on the last referendum. They need to be in a future one. They have a number of facility and capital improvements, whether that's, we don't know what the future referendum, if there is one, will look like. We don't know what kind of a referendum it will be and if it will include facilities improvement. But down the line, it needs to be a priority of our district, looking at schools like Roosevelt, because they're looking at huge class sizes. They were started as a small neighborhood West Side school. I know because the house I own is right next door. They were started to just serve that West Side neighborhood. Well, now there's all those new developments across the North Crossing, and they're all part of the school's territory of Roosevelt. So you have all these kids, and it's a really booming area. You know, they got the trails and the new businesses coming up on the West Side. So we need to look at schools like Roosevelt because at the end of the day, that is a detriment to the students' experience in the classroom. And with teachers, to your point, compensation is a huge concern. There are teachers that will leave our district and they will not only just go to Minnesota, some of them are going 30, 40 minutes away to have a better situation. And we simply cannot let that happen. We have a phenomenal district. We need to continue moving it forward. But at the end of the day, if we're not investing in our teachers and support staff who are at the front lines to make this all happen, if we're not investing in them, engaging them, and empowering them, it's not going to work out, and it's not going to look pretty.
We have about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Time flies, doesn't it?
It sure does. When you're having fun, right?
Exactly. And what are your thoughts about Wisconsin developing. It looks like we're headed towards a two-tier school system, one for private, one for public, and public money is going for the private schools.
I think public education is enshrined in our state, not just in our Constitution and other statutes, but in our hearts and in our values as the great equalizer. Wherever they live in this state, no matter what zip code, every child should have access to a high-quality, rigorous, engaging public education, one that leaves them in a situation where they're fully equipped and prepared for post-secondary, whatever that looks like, whether that's a two-year trade program, college, the military, the workforce, and apprenticeship. We need to make sure that those kids are engaged and prepared. And I think that public education is the best mechanism to do that. I'm a firm believer in our district and in districts across the state. Some are performing better than others. Our district, we're the 8th largest school district in the state, and we are at the top of the pack across the line with so many different measures. Not just test scores, but when you're looking at the outcomes for students and what the graduation rate is and things like that. So to me, we need to make sure that we continue to level the playing field for kids in this state. I would be absolutely sick to my stomach if someone was not able to have access to a high-quality education because of their background, because of their zip code, because of their family's income. That's not okay. You know, no. I grew up lower middle class, relatively, pretty much middle class. I mean, families, they're teachers, right? I had an amazing experience in the school district, absolutely amazing, and I want that for every kid.
Final question.
Okay.
If we see public money, public tax money, leave our public schools and go to private schools, doesn't that really put a crimp on public education and hurts the kids and the teachers in public schools because there's less money for them there?
Sure. Well, I will say that, you hear a lot of state-level talking points about public versus private schools. I'll say here locally, like Regis, for example, we have a really good working relationship with them over there, and Mark and the others. And I think they're doing a fine job leading their schools, and I look forward to continuing to work with them. I think at the end of the day, with the voucher expansion and some of the expansion of these choice programs, you need to ensure that you have the accountability there. That's the key. So if we can do that, we're at least in an okay situation, but we need to make sure that that's a crucial part of it.
Okay, well, that's our program for today. My thanks to Joe Luginbill. Joe, thanks for being here.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cbctv.org.